Stay tight for the final tale, which is undoubtedly my favorite YouTube story, since U2 have enraged and perplexed various music artists during their multi-decade rotten. Today, let's look at some rock stars that don't consider themselves fans of the band. Henry Rollins, a punk rocker, has no problem expressing his preferences. He has frequently expressed his dislike for the Irish band U2, telling interviewers that they have the worst rhythm section in big rock and the most cheesy rhythm section ever to play in a stadium if you listen to some of their records. They need a producer like Eno to sort of support the cabaret singer's one-trick pony because their Bruno records are terrible and their band is bad. To me, it seems a little bit like grandstanding when you run a campaign to promote both your band and world peace. In 2022, Liam Gallagher, the former frontman of Oasis, was interviewed by Loudwire about the state of rock. He said, "I mean, not all of them are useless, but the majority of them are the ones that think they're rock stars or not. They just live a very boring ting life, and I think rock and roll deserves a little bit more than just making music, you know what I mean? But get out there and get yourself, you just got to live an exciting life. It's like you two pass yourself as a rock and roll band. But what the come on man? I've never seen F and Bono, I've never seen them do anything remotely rock and roll." Pelosi is reportedly a lifelong fan of U2 and a friend of Bono, with whom he spoke about the conflict in Ukraine and St. Patrick's Day. While Bono has been a strong supporter of Ukraine, Waters has been rather critical of the West's attitude to the conflict. Waters would use Twitter to voice his disapproval of Bono, stating that it is sufficient that the Egyptian every year, Bono attends Davos to mingle with the oligarchs without encountering the Egyptian Nazis. Pelosi will give us his shabby palm. You and Echo and the Bunnymen were rivals for what seemed like decades. Both bands emerged in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and while many European bands attempted to gain popularity in America, including U2, Echo, and the Bunnymen failed. In 2011, F. Men McCulloch described their Irish rivals as, I quote, music for plumbers and bricklayers. In the past few years, the bands have reconciled. Of course, one of YouTube's most controversial actions was giving away their album songs and Innocence for free. Sharon Osbourne criticized the band on social media, writing, "U2 are business mobs, not musicians anymore. So it's no wonder you have to give your mediocre music away for free because no one wants to buy it. I've always thought he was a C-word, referring to Bono, a real proper one. If he had ever been in Liverpool, he would have been laughed out of the place." Although Bono would dismiss the criticism, her husband, an Australian, also attacked the band The Tilling Consequence of Sound. Over the past 10 years, the entire business has undergone a major transformation, with people now producing recordings directly on computers. I don't know why anyone would do that, but YouTube released an album for free. When asked if he had listened to it, Osbourne replied, No, I like some of the earlier stuff, but to be completely honest, that Bono pisses me off. He has made a name for himself by working with and discussing starving people in Africa. What he does is fake, and I don't like it." Meanwhile, Taylor Hawkins, the late drummer for the Foo Fighters, told an Australian outlet, "What happened to you too, man? I don't think people are all that excited about them. I've only listened to the new album once, and it's so characterized by the whole Orwell in 1984 extreme that it just sounds like a fart no matter how you listen to it." Meanwhile, the Black Keys' Patrick Carney told the Seattle Times that U2 and I quote completely devalued their music, sending a mixed message to fans who are struggling to make ends meet. I believe they're thinking it's very kind of them to do that. Of course, we also have to go to my favorite story about U2 and the band. They were well known for being ardent supporters of fair use and negative land negative. There is no law known as fair use. Rather, it is a legal defense. Although Negative Land released many albums during their career, one in particular caught U2's attention and led to a costly legal battle. By 1987, Negative Land had amassed a following when they released their album Escaped from Noise. This doctrine essentially permits you to take someone else's copyrighted work and transform it in some way, whether it be by sampling music, parodying it, criticizing it, or educating others. 4 years later, they received a tape featuring radio personality Casey Kasem, who is most known for hosting America's Top 40 radio show. On the tape, Kasem insulted the Irish band U2 and swore at his engineer. Keep in mind that this was before the internet, so such tapes were rather uncommon. Given how successful U2 was, the members of Negative Land reasoned that they should use the Casey Kasem tape to incorporate U's music and Negative Line. Up until this point in their career, they had never sold more than 15,000 copies of any of their previous releases. Don Joyce, a Negative L member, recalled that the majority of the material that was appropriated for our early releases was rather obscure, and YouTube was the first time we had ever done pop music. It wasn't even something that caught our attention, but it just seemed appropriate because we kept getting these tapes and cases that mentioned U2, which isn't something we would have done otherwise. In August 1991, Negative Land would release a single 3 months before A Kang Baby on its label SST Records. As you can see, the cover included the band's name in small characters and the term U2 in large letters with You Spy Plane, a spoof of the Irish band's well-known 1987 song, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, with kazoo and a lot of sampling of the original song, would be included on the U2 single. Disc would also be mixed in. Casey Cass's tirade I talked about earlier. YouTube, for their part, had 2 massive releases towards the end of the 80s, with 1987's The Joshua Tree and 1988's Rat All at Hum. Fans were eagerly anticipating what the band had in store to kick off the 90s. Here's Mark Hostler of Negative Land explaining what happened after the Bandrellas released their infamous You single. So it's ended up turning into a single. Side 1 was a cover version of the You song I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. We had a sort of dramatic reading of the lyrics by a member of the group, David, also known as a weatherman, who kind of butchered Wayno's lyrics and altered them. Now, when you do a cover version of a song, you don't have to get permission, but if you alter the lyrics, you got to get permission. So we did that. We used a very 30-second chunk of the U2 song as the beginning intro. Of course, didn't clear that there's bad words in this, and that was, they didn't like that either, but the final thing that really brought it to the detention of Island Records, that really made them decide to nail our asses, was that we ended up making the record look like this, and we thought this would be funny. It's confusing. It looks like a new album from U2 that's called Negative Land, and then we like the idea that you put this in a record store and people are CNF confused. We like the idea of creating this. At the moment of consumption, you're not quite sure what's going on here, and Negative Land's always been interested in creating that kind of moment of what is this, or they can't do that, but they are, how is this possible? And we've been able to do that a few different times in our career, and it very thrilling to get to do. We also assumed people would figure it out, but never underestimate the intendedness of the average American, because it turned out that places like Tower Records was putting up entire window displays of this record. When it came out, I'm thinking it was the new U2 album. By 1991, there already were court cases dealing with how sampling of music was to be handled from a financial and compensation point of view. There was one court case in particular which has set a precedent for how future litigation would be handled. Musicians, the licensing, publishing, and technical costs for the person who sampled another artist's music might total hundreds of thousands of dollars. U2 and its label filed a 200-page lawsuit against them a few weeks following the release of Negative Land's U2 song. Due to the profanity in their single, the band and their label were accused by Island Records of copyright infringement, trademark infringement, fraud, and defamation of character. The lawsuit also claimed that the song itself and the word U2 on the cover violated trademark law. It was also alleged by Howin Records that the single was an intentional attempt to mislead U2 fans while they awaited the release of Actin' Baby. Hostler rumored that the lawsuit would be about a single copy of the song being sold in Athens, Georgia, that was owned by Rem's former manager, who would then notify your management about the record, leading to a lawsuit as part of their lawsuit. In addition, Island Records demanded that all copies of the U2 single and all promotional materials be turned over to them and destroyed. In just 1 month, the lawsuit would have cost Negative Land and their label an estimated $70,000, more than they had made in the 11 years that they had been banned. The group did have a fair use defense to support their actions, but the lawsuit would have likely dragged on for years and bled the band and their label dry. Hostler would have told Wired magazine that it felt like their child had been abducted. The label would have been pressured to settle out of court, which they did, and IR magazine summed it perfectly when they said that Negative Land couldn't afford to prove their innocence. The lawsuit also led to the band's termination from their label. Fast forward to June 1992, and the magazine Mondo 2000 was scheduled to conduct an interview with the guitarist from U2. It would be ironic that your Zoo TV tour at the time featured sounds and live sampling from mass media outlets, and Negative Land knew about this. As a result, they would spend a large portion of their interview with The Edge asking him about his thoughts on the use of sampling on their new tour and the legality of using copyrighted material without permission. The Edge held the phone to promote the band's Zoo TV tour without the members' knowledge. The members of Negative Land were friends with the magazine's editor, who just so happened to invite 2 band members to sit in on a phone call. Although it would fall in deaf ears, The Edge asserted that YouTube disagreed with the band's aggressive legal strategy, which their label had implemented after they pushed for Negative Land to be granted to the band they named.